Hello everybody, happy Halloween. Kind of an informal day today here at the office. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Andrew Glenn. I'm an associate broker here. Been doing real estate with my home group since 2012. And I have transitioned probably 80% of my business from traditional buyers and sellers to investors. I didn't intend to, it just kind of worked out that way. And now it'd be hard for me to go back the other way, because I'll illustrate a few reasons why that I feel like this is, if you can find the right person, the right investor to work with, then it just makes our jobs, our lives a lot easier, and you just don't have to deal with as much. So why work with investors? Well, investors can do, traditional buyers and sellers, they're going to buy a house, sell a house. If they're not selling to buy, I mean, maybe you can get two in a year. If that's all they're doing, if they're selling, leaving the state, or if they're buying a house, that's the one deal you got from them. So I have an investor. I have two main investors right now. One investor, we've closed 6 deals this year, and the other investor, we've done 12 deals this year. So 2 people, 14 deals, and they just want to keep doing more and more and more because we're successful. Double-sided deals. I have a couple deals where I've put it pre-marketing. I always pre-market, and I get people calling me all the time to come see them because they're all fully remodeled. We always pick great areas. Sometimes they come unrepresented, sometimes they don't. It doesn't matter to me, but I've done a couple double-sided deals. And then this one right here is important to me because there's no emotion. There's no falling in love with the property. There's no, it has to be the right neighborhood. There's no, you need to, schools and kids and who's in the neighborhood. There's none of that stuff. So it's to me, it's super important, just for my time and my sanity. I'm sure everybody in here has had that client that you showed the house, you knew it hit all their marks, and for whatever reason, one reason or another, they didn't buy it, and you couldn't figure it out. So that's a big reason for me. Now, most of my clients are fix and flip. That one other client, he's done a lot of buy and hold and fix and flip, so kind of a mix. But so that's usually what they're like. I'd say 9 out of 10 of the people you're going to meet who call themselves an investor are looking for a fix and flip property, something they can buy at a discount, put money into it, and sell it for higher. So this is going to vary. So discounted properties, how much of a discount? Well, that really depends. It depends on the investor. It depends on if they're an institutional investor. It depends on if they're just by themselves. I'm sure everybody's heard on the radio commercials, come join my group, Dan Merrill, all those guys, right? That they're just bombarding our marketplace with, learn how to be an investor. Don't do it with any of your own money, blah, blah, blah. So I can tell you exactly how they're doing it without their own money. Like that's not a lie. It's 100% accurate. You can do investing with no money. None of your own money, just time. A bunch of people are doing it every day. It's entirely possible. So that part of it's not a lie, but it's just a lot of people. So I've sold off-market properties to investors who they only want to make 10% ROI. Some of them want to make 30% ROI. Some of them have to make 50%. Some of them want 100% return for every dollar they put in. So obviously you can see that some of the people are going to be very easy to work with, and some of them are going to be nearly impossible to work with. So that's kind of, to me, that conversation, if you ever meet with someone who is an investor, the first thing you ask them is, what is your ROI, what ROI are you looking for? Because that'll tell you right then whether they're going to be easy or they're going to be hard to work with. If they're looking to make 100%, the term's called cash on cash. So for every dollar I put in, my return, I get $1 out. So if they're looking for a cash on cash of 100%, I would not work with them because it's going to be impossible. This is not 2008. So if they're in the 20, 30, 40%, that's possible. Now I've worked with people who are 10%, and those are easy, super easy people. The numbers, they're essentially open door, but not open door. I mean, that's essentially what Open Door wants to make. They want to make 10% ROI. So that's why they can give competitive offers, and they'll close a lot of deals, whereas, someone who's looking for 40, 50%, I mean, you're going to be writing 30, 40, 50 offers to get one, and that's just not a good use of your time. So that would be, to me, if you walk out of here with nothing else, that right there, that qualifying question, that's the number one question you should answer. And if they can't give you a reasonable explanation or an explanation that makes sense to you, then I wouldn't even bother working with them because it's just going to be a waste of your time. Now, so they want, some of them want to do, some of the guys I work with, they want to do light remodels. They don't want to spend any more than 25 on any property, so that kind of affects what I'm looking for. And some of them are super aggressive, and they want to push the back end. They want to see how much they can push. They want to see if they can get to the top end comp. So it just depends on the person you're working with. But all these are opportunities. Again, it all goes back to the ROI. So, you know, investors are always looking at the ROI. So if you, and again, this is a very interactive class. So if I say something that you don't quite grasp, or you need a, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So we're working with this one guy, and he wants a higher cap rate than he's getting, and to see the return on investment. Where would I get my hands on a worksheet so I can present something to him?
A cap rate worksheet. So he's looking for rentals.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get to that. I got rentals at the end of this, so
Okay.
we can discuss rentals when we get there. But cap rate, determining cap rate is largely dependent upon the owner providing you correct information. I mean, and you can kind of justify it that way. But if they're not providing you the actual current rents, then it's almost impossible to provide the actual cap rate. So, deal structure for investors. Does everybody know what hard money financing is?
Mm-hmm.
You know how it works. Do you know that there's hard money for the property only, and then there's hard money that will include rehab costs? So there's 100% financing, there's 90% financing, there's 80% financing, there's and then that'll just depend.
Have you actually found 100% financing, or is that with gap funding?
No, 100%. But 100% financing comes with its own peril because they want a personal guarantee. So I would never sign a personal guarantee. I have had investors who do. It just depends. I mean, so why would you sign it, right? So why would you sign a personal guarantee? So if you found a property for $400,000 that you put $30,000 into and make 70, well, you've put $0, so your ROI is infinite. That's why it's attractive. And so
Who are those lenders?
I know a few of them. I would say they're pretty shady, but I know I've done like 5 deals this year with a lender. It's 100% financing. It's all personal guarantees.
They have to be experienced, like they had to have done so many deals already.
There was no vesting process.
Really?
No, because it's all tied. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all asset based. You're already buying an undervalued asset, so their money is protected by real estate, and then the personal guarantee on top of that. So it just depends, and it depends on. So this particular investor had, what they did is they had access to large IRA funds, and so they helped people convert the IRA into self-directed, so they could invest it in real estate, and so they would sell positions. So like this funder would come in, this person would come in with 200,000. Well, that's not enough. You need 100. So another person would come in second position at 100,000, and that's where it got kind of convoluted, and you know you start getting layers of investors, and this guy doesn't care, but this guy wants to see comps, and this guy wants to drive the property. So it's definitely not. There's not you couldn't call like Capital Fund 1 and say I need 100% financing. They're just not going to do it. That's not their business model. But so you're more than likely, if you find the 100% financing, they're more than likely going to be a private lender with access to private funds, not institutionalized whatsoever. So it's going to be their contract, their deed of trust. Everything is going to be weighted towards them, and more than likely you're going to sign a personal guarantee, which is the reason you use hard money financing, because there is no personal guarantee. It's all asset based. So that's why it's more expensive. So points, I'm sure everybody knows what a point is, right? So some of them charge point on the front, or they charge a point to the back. But somewhere or another, they're going to make their money. They're going to make, like right now, I have a couple deals with a lender that lended 80. They lend 80-80. They lend 80% of the purchase price and 80% of the rehab, and they'll charge 2 points on the rehab money, but no point on the lending money, on the buy money. So it's all convoluted when you get into who's paying what point, when are you paying it, and that's all going to be very lender specific. There is no standard, because it's their contract. It's still under Dodd-Frank, so don't get confused with that, because they are lending money. It's all governed by Dodd-Frank, but still pretty loose. So Interest rate. I've seen people come out now super aggressive because there's so many hard money lenders. You can get, at the best I've seen is 9, and it can go all the way up to 13. 9,
18.
huh?
18. So
Well, I
maybe
mean,
not as
you
much
could get up to
anymore,
18, but I would never. I mean, I could find the guy I use he started at 11.9, and now we're at 10 flat with no points. So it's, I mean, you could find people, and obviously their interest rates will change with your success and how comfortable they are with you, because it's just an asset. I mean, they're figuring that if they make you put 20% down on an asset that's already undervalued in the neighborhood, I mean, to me, that's I would loan that money all day. Because if you're buying it at 300, fixed up it's worth 400, they're making you put down 60, so the loan is only 240. If you default, anywhere in between, like if you default and you put money into it to fix it up, so now they have an asset that's fixed up that they can sell for 400 that their note on is only 240. So it makes perfect sense as to why they do it. It's just, to me, that's the easiest, best way to make. If I had the money, that's what I would do. Hard money lender, because it's so. And they say they don't want to take the asset, but they're more than happy to take the asset. They would rather. I mean, I guess if you're doing it over and over again and paying them 13% over and over and over again, maybe they don't. But I've never seen them have a problem taking the asset. So prepaid interest. A lot of times, so that could be structured one of two ways. Sometimes you just pay to close, like your hard money's paid up to close, and then interest is accrued. And then sometimes you can pay. Some lenders will want your down. So like say for that example, it's 240. They want your down payment 240 plus your closing costs, and then they're going to figure whatever the term of the note is. So if it's 6 months, they're going to want all that interest paid at close. So there's zero risk for them of not getting paid. It's all paid at close. So I've seen lenders do that too. So it's just how it's structured. That's why you got to be it's why you got to shop it around, because if they want points, if they don't want any points, great. But if they want all their money prepaid, I mean, if you sell it in 4, obviously it's amortized, but still there's no risk for them. So it just depends on how I mean, you're going to pay the money either way. So I like to pay it at close, but it's just how you want to do it. Now, some I've been seeing lately, some of them, even if it's asset-based, they're requiring a credit check. Now, if you're buying through the LLC, they want to see they might want to check all the members of the LLC's credit. So it's just, I stay away from anybody who requires a credit check. Anybody who's going to look into my personal finances, I don't use them as a hard money because there's another guy who won't. So I've seen that lately where that's coming up, that they're asking for credit checks. Deal structure. So gap funding. Anybody who knows what gap funding is? You know what gap funding is? So gap funding is exactly what it means. It's filling the gap. So you have lender A who's going to give you a hard money loan for $240,000. Well, the purchase price is $300,000, so you need $60,000. Say you're going to put $50,000 into that deal, so you actually need $110,000 plus your closing costs. So you need, and if you're not going to if you're going to not carry it yourself, if you want someone else to take care of all the interest and all that stuff, if you're going to do true 100% financing, this is where 100% financing can work without a personal guarantee, is you find someone who's called a gap funder. So they give you, so person A gives you $240,000 to buy the house. Person B gives you, let's say, $115,000 for the down payment, for the to carry the note, and for the construction costs. And they're going to be in second position. So the first position would be the 240. Second position will be the gap funder. Anybody have any questions on that? On what that means and how that looks? No? Okay. So again, why use gap funding? Well, I mean, it takes out your personal risk. I mean, you literally have zero money in the deal. None of your own personal money. So it makes, if the deal is only worth $10,000, let's say the back end, you can only make 10 out of it, but that's $10,000 with zero risk to you. I mean, the only thing that's at risk is those people might not lend to you again if it goes bad. So it's pretty lucrative, and every single all those organizations, Armando, Monolago, all those guys, they're either telling you how to do gap funding or they're going to tell you how to do wholesaling, and that's what they mean with don't use any of your own money, because you're literally not using any of your money. You're fundraising. You're a fundraiser more than anything. And the guy that I'm doing 13 deals with, he has no money, none of his own money is tied up in any of these deals. It's all gap funders from various sources and hard money. It's absolutely insane. I was, when he came to me and we started working together, I'd never heard of it, but he kind of schooled me to the game on how that works and how and why you would do it that way. And it just, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but I mean, if the money dries up or if he burns a bridge or whatever, he's done. He can't do it himself. So it's a risk, but the ROI is, infinite. It is what it is. I mean, you put no money in, you can make $100,000 a year. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of a cool way to do it. I don't do it that way. I use my own funds for rehab. And this example is, and this is kind of something I want you guys to get your head wrapped around when you're looking at deals with potential clients. And why, like if someone tells you, hey, I can sell you the deal for 150, it's worth 225, and you only need to put 30 into it. Well, that sounds great, but it's probably not all that lucrative. And the reason why is because of all these costs. And this is my personal deal. So the front end cost, you can see the closing cost is very minimal because I use my commission to pay for it on the front. And the closing cost to sell, very minimal because I'm selling it. I'm an agent. I can sell it owner agent. I don't pay the broker. So just keep this in mind. I'll show you a different deal that has me as the agent on it. That's a little bit different. But so we bought it for 100. We knew the ARV was 200, so we had an 80-20 lender. So we needed 80,000 to get into the deal. After we paid the doc prep fee and all the closing costs, HOAs and everything, even with the commission, because it was a distressed property, we didn't get full 3%. We got a couple points. We still owed 2,500. Now, because it was so cheap, the holding cost includes, I mean, you got to remember HOAs, water, sewer, trash, electric, insurance. So short-term insurance is pretty expensive because there's not very many people that will do it. So you got to go. There's one company I think everybody gets it underwritten out of. It's called Foremost, and I think they do the majority of the underwriting in Phoenix. So why it's so expensive is because you're rehabbing a property. You're not living there. So generally short-term insurance is probably like double what your policy premium will be. Like, so for instance, on this condo, it was like $900 for 6 months, whereas like my personal house is like $700 for the year. So those are costs that you need to figure out, holding costs. So the repair costs, we had 54.
Plus the hard money payments.
Yeah, all the interest, everything's in the holding. So those are all things that you need to think about. That it's not just purchase and rehab and sell it. There's a bunch of other costs and associated. And then the closing costs. Well, just because we sold it ourselves, unless we find a buyer, I still have to pay an agent. And I always pay 3% because I want to sell it quick. I don't want to have any argument. And then HOAs again, disclosures, and any kind of title, escrow, all those fees are tied up in this. So that's why it looks like we put $54,000 into it, but our actual profit is only $31,000. So $100,000 purchase, a $54,000 rehab, and we made $31,000. So there's that much of a difference in the hard costs. Now, if you're just a regular Joe without a real estate license, well, then you got the closing costs on the front, and then you have almost double the closing costs on the sell. So then that deal shrinks down. That deal is probably only worth like $20,000. So you think you're getting a home run because it only needs $50,000 worth of work. So you think you're going to make $50K. Well, you're going to make $20K if everything goes absolutely perfect. That's why it makes it a little different.
One thing I've run into a bunch too with earlier on, taking on investors that are pretty new, they don't account for holding costs. Like rehabs almost always go longer than unless they do them all the time and they got their system down. So they might only account for like 3 or 4 months of holding costs.
Well, they'll do that. I mean, my investor at the beginning, that's what he would do too. He would say, well, how long? 4 months? I said, no, just figure 6 every time. Because,
they go longer, and
I mean,
their payments are, $3 grand every month.
Yeah, they're like
Hard money,
35 to 5,000 hard money, and that's on like a $200,000 loan. Because it's interest only at 10 to 12%. I mean, that adds up pretty quick. So, does anybody know the average days on market across Maricopa County right now?
67?
From list to contract. list to close, it's over 90 days now. It used to be 89, it's over 90. So from the time you list it to the time you sell it is 90 days, and that doesn't include any construction, any potential problems, any mobilization, anything like that. So that's why I say 6 months, because I mean, right now we're turning things. I mean, even small condos we're turning in 6 weeks at the very best. Like at the very fastest, we're turning things in 6. So I mean, you got to figure it's 8 to 10 minimum. So by the time you're 8 to 10 plus 3, I mean, the best case scenario is 5 months. So from acquisition to close, that's your best case. So I always figure at least another 2 months on top of that, so 6 to 7 months, and then you can have a good idea of how much actual money you're going to spend on that.
You're using that gap funding. If you're getting gap funding, you can use those for your payments and stuff. Right?
You can use the gap funding for everything. Once they, so I'll show you on this transaction. So on this one, so our ARV, and this is why it's kind of funny. So our ARV was 150, our purchase price was 88, and the rehab was only 24. So you come down here, and our projected profit's only 22, best case scenario. So we have a holding cost 12. So this lender is 12.5% down, 13.5% interest rate, but they're going to loan. They loaned 80% on the rehab. So down here, so realtor fees and closing costs, because I'm the realtor on this one. So I gave them 6%. So I gave them five to sell it minus 500 because of the volume discount I gave. The other 1% is to account for escrow, title, stuff like that. And then gap funds. So he borrowed $18,840 in gap funds to get into this deal. So they loaned him. So the note is like 70 something is the actual note, the first note from the first lender, and then he has his gap fund that they're paying 12.5% to, and that includes $11,000 for the $11,000 goes towards the rehab, $4,800 goes towards the closing costs, and then he had $1,000 for HOAs and electric, and then he had another $2,000 for miscellaneous, and then the gap fund interest. So he has a $2,200. So that's just the interest on the gap fund money, not the money that he borrowed to buy the house. So.
Do you ever discount your commission more than? Do you ever do a 4%?
No. I'll never do like the best I've ever done is like 1.75, and that was for someone who did like 10 deals a year. Because invariably, well, my background is general contractor. I still do that, like 12 years as a GC. So invariably I end up designing these things. So I'm not going to give them a free design and then sell the property, where if they go get another agent, they're just going to sell the property. They might consult, but they're not doing what I'm doing. So I just frame it that way. I said, this is the deal. Like, I'm not going to credit you anything on the front because I found the deal. And then on the back side, it's 2 points. And then, but that always leaves me wiggle room, because especially if they're a really good client and their intent is to do more than 1 or 2 deals. Like if the deal starts getting, we hold the deal for a long time, or the market shifts as it has right now. The market's different now than it was in June, and so we've acquired several properties in May and June that today it's slow and we're not selling them. So I like to give myself, I would say, wiggle room. So I could. If the offer comes in too low, or if they ask for closing costs or anything like that, I can say, hey, I'll credit you this one, just make it up for me on the next one, kind of thing. So that way I look like the good guy, But I always, if I make I haven't made my full 2% on anything yet, but I've gotten the front end on like 14 deals, so I'm not too heartbroken about it. But it's still, it works to me. The math works out as long as I make. For the deal I make, if it's a $200,000 house, I want to make like at least 8 to 10 from both sides, then I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that's volume.
Are you finding all of these on the MLS, or are they
Majority is on the MLS. I don't deal with wholesalers. And if you guys have any questions on that, like the reason why is leverage. If you deal with a wholesaler, you have zero leverage. And why? Because they make the money. They blast out to everybody. There's no ethics. right? So they can tell you have a deal, but you may not have a deal. And then they want $3,000 to $5,000 non-refundable earnest before they'll even let you in the house. And if they let you in the house before, it's for like 20, 30 minutes. There's no inspection. So the risk to me is just insane, because if you go in and walk, you're going to lose $3,000 to $5,000. You know, and at that point, it might be a case: do I want to lose 3 to 5, or do I want to lose 20 because this property is crap? You know, so I just don't. There's the wholesale market. There's not to say that I've never found a good deal on wholesale, because I have, but if I can avoid it, I will, because you have zero leverage, no leverage whatsoever.
And they're bad people. Some of them.
There's some good people in the world.
He's going in with Jesus.
Yeah.
And he knows what's going on. Like, he's ripping older people off, people that are desperate.
Yeah.
And
That's
so why I have the same feeling. I
But
don't like
one guy doesn't make the whole
I know.
lunch bag.
I know.
So
It's possible.
my 2 cents on it, and you know, everybody's got their own business model, but how I feel about it is I don't feel like wholesalers are doing anybody any favors.
No.
And especially not the person they're buying it from, because if there's a difference in between what they can lock it up for and what they can sell it to, like, how is that ethically okay for you not to give that to the seller?
And it's really strange why their ARV is so high.
Well, because they want
I know.
to sell the deal.
It's like they top the best comp that it's.
Well, there's nothing wrong.
It's not
like,
illegal to do that.
in the last 2 or 3 years, there's absolutely nothing wrong with finding the very best comp and using it, because very likely you can get it. Now that the market has shifted, like, I think everybody needs to shift their focus on, like, you might not want to try to go for the top end comp, because you might not hit it. And might only you not hit it, you might not appraise for that. So that's what, I mean, we're going through a restructuring now where we're going to start doing more condos, because those are quicker, less risk. The buyers in Phoenix, condos are always hot in Phoenix. So that's kind of what we're doing personally. So not to say that we wouldn't do a single family deal, but it has to be a really good single family deal to do
That's
it.
what I was gonna ask then, so like, do you have a specific strategy on the MLS, because and it may be because I'm looking in the area where everybody else wants them too, that it makes it harder to get.
The strategy, so it depends. So we'll scour. So I've lucked out with my investor. Like, he's borderline ADD. We're like, or I mean OCD. Okay, so like obsessive about. So he scrubs it to. He'll scrub it and send me properties, and check. He'll like check this one, check this one, check this. So every night, every morning I wake up and there'll be a list, and it's all from him, just on the new listings that came out that he sends me all these Redfin links, and then I scrub them. Not to say that I mean, very rarely do I agree with his assessment, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if you wanted to start today to look at properties, I would go back. I would just filter my search for 90 days plus on market, and then stick to areas you know. Like I can tell you, there's certain pockets of the valley where I could see, I could pull up the monsoon view, because I use monsoon heavily when I'm looking at this. I can just pull, because the monsoon pulls up that house and then everything around it, and it pops up prices of recently sold. I can tell you within 10 seconds if I need to look at that property harder, or if I know it's just no good. Like, so stick to areas you know, like in an area you're very comfortable with, where you know values, because the other thing is speed. How quickly are you getting to that property? Because if you see it, then other people are going to see it. And some people have software that just shoots out offers, like some of the wholesalers do.
Oh, I know. We found one in Old Town, and fixed up was $400,000.
Mm-hmm.
They had it for $250,000. I'm like, we got to go look right now. And by the time we could even get in our car and go look at it, it was already pending.
Yeah. Do they have? I mean, someone's built a proprietary system that will, anything new on the market, if it fits into certain categories, it'll fire an offer off. It's pretty crazy. So you got to be quick, but
They give first peek to certain investors, and investors know that area, and they just know, okay, yep, I got it.
yeah, the wholesalers, if you're on a preferred wholesaler list, like I get emails from probably 30 different wholesalers every day, and most of the time I just send it to trash, because I'm not going to even. I can see, like, if I see the property, I could see that there's just no ARV there, or I personally don't like to deal with like Central Phoenix if it looks like it's been beat to hell. Like, there's just no point, because you just know it's going to cost more than the spread probably. but so that's my strategy. Like I'll go 90 days, and I'll search an area that I know, and then I'll just start looking. Because I mean, we have one in Central Phoenix that it was listed for 360, and I knew there was no way I was going to sell for 360, so I offered them 315, and we ended up closing at 320. So they took 40 grand off the list price. Just because it's listed for something doesn't mean that's what they're going to get. And there's other ways to frame your offer to be aggressive. Like we usually do like 5 days inspection. I'll say in my offer that we're waiving the appraisal and financing conditions. I'll say, and I always leave it out for myself to assign it. So we'll either close as the person on line 1 or assignee. So I have an assignment clause in my contracts. And it's all boilerplate. I have a template, so I know if I'm ready for this guy, I just click the template and all the contracts get filtered out. And then, do you guys know how to make templates in zip forms? Like for specific people? So that's how I have my investors. I have them just filtered, so all their stuff's already, so I can write an offer in like 5 minutes. It's pretty quick, and that's what you got to do to win these things. But that's what I do. I'll go 90 days, 120 days, pick an area that I really, really know. So like North Central Phoenix or Peoria or Central Phoenix, because I've been doing flips in Central Phoenix for the last 3 years, like I know what things sell for there, or I know what condos are worth there. So I just pick areas that I'm super comfortable with. That's where I start. And then, if I see something in Tempe, like I kind of know Tempe a little bit, and then Gilbert, a little bit know I've sold houses out there. So just depends on. So what you want to get it to is to a science where like you can scrub a list, you can look at properties, addresses, and know whether or not you need to dive deeper or not. Like you could just know, because if it's 300 and 85254, I probably should look at that. I know I should look at that property just to see if it's going to work. So it's just it takes time to build up those skills and just the knowledge to know it. But that's kind of what I do. I quickly scan and I don't spend a lot of time on it, like maybe half hour a day on my list, and then so we'll get to rentals. But anybody have any questions on how this deal was set up with gap funding? The realtor fees involved and why it makes more sense to be an owner agent and have your license to do this.
What is the gap funding again?
So gap funding is just the difference between what the first position loan, like the acquisition of the property, and like what the rest of the costs are. So if you're going to gap fund it, that means someone else is going to give you the money for the rehab and the down payment. So that's
typically private investors, right?
And who's doing that? Like,
usually that's all private. But I mean, you can find people that'll do portions of the rehab and they'll finance that. Like BE Lending, that's who we use. I mean, you can find them on the internet. So BE Lending, they'll do up to 80/80, like pretty fair terms too, like 1 point. And usually, so how that works is your contractor, you have to use a licensed contractor. So just FYI, if you're going to go that route, and they're going to want to see lien waivers. And then they'll pay the draw up, and it's pretty simple. They're pretty fast. They're pretty good to work with. Any other questions on that? Gap funding.
My question has to do with the 90 to 120 days out. So you have that parameter, and then the idea is that if it looks good, they're likely to strike a deal. They're just
Yeah, I mean,
prices
so
down closer, and
if you look at So when you look at the property, I mean, you always can tell pretty quickly, like if the person's just unrealistic.
Right.
If that's the reason they're on the market so long, it's just because they're unrealistic.
right.
So that's the first check, right? So you check that. If they're just overpriced, then they're likely not gonna. But if they're if they're like 10% under and they just haven't sold because there's a no man's land. It's what my investor and I always call it. We call it no man's land because it's not a retail property. There's no retail end user going to buy this. But it's not priced low enough for an investor, and that's kind of what you want to find. You want to find the no man's land property. It's not discounted enough where everybody's eyeballs are on it, but it's never going to sell to a retail end user. Like the people who are willing to take on rehabs and do 203K loans, there's like 1 out of 100 people are willing to do that because it's such a hoop to jump through. Even you can do it, but it's such a pain in the ass to do a 203K.
I thought about doing it personally, and then talking to somebody about it, and all the.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare because you have to. Because then you're trying to get an appraiser to appraise it at ARV, which it's tough. That's tough. I don't go that route. So that's kind of what you're looking for. You're looking for the dead zone.
Okay.
You're looking for that. It's just like maybe it's 10% under, and you can write an offer that's that makes it work. So that's kind of.
So when you say nobody's gonna buy it at retail, is that because it's
It's
not
dated.
fully finished, or
Not
just
good
is that it's just
It's
that-
dated. It won't like there's something wrong with it. There's like the roof. There's something wrong with the roof or something like that. Whereas you just know there's no. It's either not going to appraise. It can't go conventional. It can't go FHA. There's no end user going to buy that property. So that's what I really look for when I'm looking at these. Is like they have it listed near retail and you just know it's not going to sell. So okay. So the other part of investors is rentals. Anybody ever buy a rental for anybody or have their own rentals? So rentals are fairly simple. It's like, what are they looking for? Well, there's two things that they usually look for. One is the cap rate. Does everybody know how to calculate cap rate? What cap rate is? Any questions on what that is? So it's your net operating income divided by the current market value. So and net is important because that's what you're actually taking home every month. So if they could play around with the numbers. So on the MLS, if you're looking at rentals or if you're looking at business opportunities or multiplexes, like there'll be a whole section where they're telling you net operating income, they're telling you how much rents are, they're telling you how much expenses are, and they can play around with the cap rate right there. Because if they're giving you gross versus net, it's going to be the number's going to be different. So, and then the number that I personally look for is cash on cash, and cash on cash is your annual dollar income divided by your actual cash investment. So if you bought a house for 20% down, $200,000, your investment is $40,000, right? That's the cash you have in it, and then obviously you add in your expenses and mortgage and all that stuff. But if you're making $16,000 a year on the rental, you divide that by your actual cash in there, and that'll tell you you're returning your money. So if that turns out to be like 15-20%, it's probably a really good investment. So cash on cash is probably the most. It's for me personally, and I mean there's a lot of people who buy them all cash, so they don't really care. They just want to see the cap rate. They don't really care on cash. But if you're going to buy like a cash on cash is usually for like a big purchase, like $2 million. Like you're buying 10 doors, then 20 doors, something like that. You're buying a multiplex. Cash on cash is probably the number they're going to look at the most because they want to know how much they're putting in versus how much they're getting out every year and what that return is, because if they have enough to buy a multiplex, they have enough to invest in something else. So that's the number that's the most important. Any questions on that? On why it's important or anything like that? Excuse me. So a lot of the questions. How do you find investors? So investment groups, have you guys, like we talked about earlier, like Armando Montalago, like companies like that advertise, like if you want to be an investor, you come to my class or you come to this, right? So there's one in Phoenix, Scottsdale area, it's called Renatus, nationwide company, and they have investors, and they make you pay money to join their group, their networking group, and they have classes every week. And the two guys that I have, that's where they came from, Renatus.
What's the name of it?
Renatus, Renatus. So invariably, they have realtors who are members because it's a good way to find business. But if you can network with people who are in that group, network with people who are in similar groups, and why I like it is because they're very motivated, they're very interested in real estate, and if you can provide value to them, they will use you. And they'll use you over another member just as if you're providing them with a good value opportunity. So that's where these two guys came from, Renatus. Originally they were working together, then they broke apart, and I work with both of them. So, and then networking, obviously networking's a big one. It's hard to find, so over my lifetime of doing this, like I've only found two guys who are ever consistently closing deals. Like I've wasted a lot of time, a lot of driving, written hundreds of offers that have never gone anywhere, even if we got them under contract, because I wasn't working with the right investors. I was working with people who talked about it, but when it came down to the end to actually pull the trigger on the deal, they didn't do it because scared. I mean, most people are just scared to do it. It's hard to do your first deal. Like, it's really hard. I waffled on my first deal, like, for probably 3-4 days, whether or not I wanted to pull the trigger. And then I just finally decided I was gonna do it, so.
So your investors, did they come to you because you knew the contractor and the subs and all sort of thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
somewhat. One of them came to me because he had a problem and he needed to get out of it. Another agent put him in a bad spot, so I helped him out of it.
Okay. So I don't have those contacts to get the work done.
Mhm.
So what do you recommend for somebody who can handle that part of it, can provide that part of the solution?
Well, I mean, so the value to me. So we'll talk about this when this is all done. But the value, and when we ask questions, the value is the currency in investing is the property. That's the currency. If you have the properties, you have the power.
Okay.
So you're a licensed agent. If you find a property, you write an offer on it, you get it under contract, that's your currency. I mean, I bet if you found a property and you put it on Facebook, I have this property, ARV's this, blah, blah, I mean, I guarantee you sell it. I mean, it's just the way and that's wholesaling. That's buying
Right.
that's buying properties, and what you have is marketable title.
Mhm.
So you can market your title, you can market your position, and sell your position. So if I was going to start out today, that's what I tell my investors. Like, he doesn't have any money, but it doesn't matter because he has property. Property is the currency in investing. In this game that we're playing, if you have properties, you have everything. Because you can go find them. I mean, I guarantee you can go find the money. I mean, you could walk out of here and talk to 10 people who are willing to invest with you money if you have the property. That's the property is the hard part. The money, finding the money, getting the contractors. That's the not easy part, easier part. The part is the inventory is the hard part.
Okay.
So that's what I would recommend is, find a couple deals, bring off-market deals to people, try to write offers on stuff, and I mean, even if you identify something and say, hey, I found this property, will you let me represent you? And then, obviously don't tell them the address until you get the
Yeah.
agreement, but you know what I mean? It's just, I've been burned by that. in my more trusting, carefree days when I didn't know how this game was played.
Mhm.
Now, make no mistake, like, the investing world is, like he said, it's shady. It's cutthroat. It's very cutthroat, very shady. I mean, we had a property in Maricopa. They told us we had it. We were driving there to drop off the EM, and they called us, oh yeah, we gave it to someone else. We're like, we're halfway to Maricopa right now. Are you kidding me? Like, just, they don't care. I mean, they really don't care. So, I mean, so again, like, the currency, if you leave here with, don't remember anything I said, just remember the property is the currency. That's where all the leverage is. That's where all the power is. If you have control over the property, then I guarantee you'll find people who want to work with you because they don't have them.
So you write these contracts in your name and then
Form an LLC.
No, but I'm saying that then you find one of your investor clients, or do you have an investor client in mind?
Well, right now I have an investor client. I already have investor clients that I know that'll work with it. But I originally formed an LLC, my own personal investment LLC, and I would write contracts and name my LLC with the assignment clause in it.
Okay.
And so any wholesaler that you see out there, that's exactly what they're doing.
Mhm.
They're writing the contract, wholesaling it. Now, I'm not as a licensed realtor. You have many opportunities to make money. I mean, you could just give them your position and just say, I want the commission. In so many ways, as a licensee, that we can make money and not be shady.
So on your purchase contract, do you state, I guess in like section 8, that you can assign to
Mhm.
somebody else?
Mhm.
Is there specific verbiage? Or
I
just,
say, buyer reserves the right to close as purchaser identified on line 1 of the purchase contract or assignee. So, I mean, 9 times out of 10 at this point we're not assigning anything, but I mean we always give ourselves the option just in case.
So I generally will do it within the 10 days.
You have to.
Yeah. Do you
You
normally
have-
do it within your 10 days of due diligence, or do you
Yep.
able to get longer?
No, it's usually 10 days.
Okay, gotcha.
You do it in your 10 days.
Why do you need the assignment clause in the LLC?
Because I don't want to write anything in my own name.
No, the LLC is yes, but why the assignment clause is included?
Why is it? Because if you're not intending to close it yourself, if the intent is to go find an investor to work with or
No, but
to wholesale it.
The LLC is not the purchase contract or the sales contract, this is the entity.
The LLC is the one, like, I write my contracts with my LLC.
Yes.
So mine, CAJ Investments, is on line one.
Yes,
So in order for me to give it to anybody else, I have to have an assignment clause in there.
for the LLC.
Yeah. Well, not
Or
just
for anything.
just for any purchaser. Like I could write a contract for Christian and put an assignment clause, and then I could sell it to anybody else.
But the assignment clause is in the contract.
It's in the
sales
contract. Yep. It's
The original purchase contract.
Yes.
no, there's some debate on whether or not you need one or not, because there's nothing that says you can assign it in our purchase contract. But I've had lenders, I've had short sale lenders make me physically write an addendum saying that this contract cannot be assigned. Cannot be assigned. There's no assignment clause in the contract. They've had me write an addendum. So there's a little bit of, I always put it in just to cover myself. But I mean, whether or not you actually need it,
Well, I would think since the contract is stating this person's buying it, so I would.
right? But there's nothing in the contract that says it can't be assigned specifically. So I argued until I was blue in the face on getting this because my client that I was short selling for lived in Japan, so it was really, and everything had to be wet signature, so it was really hard to get stuff from him. So, but I ended up having to do the addendum. They wouldn't close. They would not sign sign the short sale agreement without it. So you may not need it, but I always put it in.
Well, yeah.
So, anybody have any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
If you have a listing that you want to market to investors, where would you go to like determine the price to build like a new build on there or the ARV? Would you bring like a general contractor out to the site and someone would draw something up, or?
Like what kind of property is it now?
It's in Equestrian Manor, so it's a higher end property,
Mhm.
but it's a scraper. So I was planning on marketing it to investors.
Mm-hmm. Is there close comps around it?
Yeah, a little bit.
I mean, I don't know that I would waste that much time or put that much effort into it just because you don't want to show someone, like almost guaranteeing that like they said they could do it for this price or whatever. I would just put, what comparable lot to comparable something else that's sold and say, if you do this, you can get that.
Just do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And because I guarantee you that's what every wholesaler is doing. Like there's only one wholesaler in the whole valley that I know that actually puts some pretty good effort into something, and when they send you a package, it's actually pretty good. Like it's actually pretty good, pretty well put together, and that's Net Worth Realty. Matt Beck is the guy who does it. Their wholesale stuff is generally pretty decent, like pretty close. Their ARVs are pretty good, and their packets are actually really informative, really good. So that's the only, like if you can get on his list, like it shows you like what we kind of do when we try to wholesale, because I try to put something together similar instead of just an email that says, hey, you can get this price for
What's his name?
Matt Beck, Net Worth Realty.
And Hector Paz, do you know how they work? I'm really surprised. I'm on Hector's list, and I'm getting about 10, 15 emails every single day. Some of them are listed, some of them are off the market.
Well,
It's really
I would say,
impressive, the volume is coming.
well, I would be careful. So generally, this is like not across the board, but generally, the properties that you see on one list are almost always on someone else's list, and so you never really know like the line, like who actually has the contract, because like there's no way there's that many properties. Like there's a couple people I get the same, like I've caught them. Like these guys are offering it for like
Well,
234,
yeah, can't you see like
and
a
this
little
guy's
bump?
offering it for like 260. Well, you got to be on enough lists to
Yeah.
cross reference.
Right.
But I've seen it where it's the same exact property, but this guy's offering it for this guy's offering it for this. So who actually, like, I don't know who actually has the contract. So that's what I mean. Like, I don't think that they're doing that many. I think there's a pool of them that they have permission to market for someone who has them under contract.
I have the feeling that they put the property on the contract and they see reasonably priced or below retail, they put it on the contract and then try to sell it for a few thousand.
Oh, well, anybody, so Matt Beck, and this is kind of what I was.
Because all the properties I checked in MLS, everything was UCB.
Yeah. So like we were talking about, the property is the currency, right? So Matt has a system now where he's not charging anything. like, I don't know that he's not, but I don't think he's charging anything, any wholesale fee. He's making money by just getting the commission.
Mhm.
Like, that's how, so his network of, like, if he doesn't have, say you don't have any buyers, your network of buyers is infinite. If you're writing these contracts and you put it out there, like, you're gonna get a buyer. Like, you have, and if you're selling it for even a slight discount of what the MLS is, like that, like a bunch of times, I've gone head to head with him on contracts for my investor, and I've lost somehow. I'm like, how? There's no way you're wholesaling this for better than a price that I offered, because they wouldn't. Why would they take it? But that's what they're doing. They're offering it. They're competitive offer, comparatively to other investors, but they're not marking it up at all. It's just the commission. That's just what they're making
But this is.
Commission
this
on the
is
sale?
on the sale.
Yes.
Yeah, they're so say I'm your realtor, right? But Matt Beck brings you an off-market deal because we can't get it anymore. Well, now all of a sudden Matt Beck's your realtor because it's his contract. His name is on the contract as the realtor.
Okay, so in other words, his price is already included with his fee. So
Yeah. So if he says, you know, he locked it up at 285, and he says I'll sell it to you for 285. Well, how's he making money? He's making money off the 3%.
because he already has the fee agreement already. Okay.
There's no fee. I mean, if it's listed on the
Well,
MLS,
fee
he's getting.
agreement with the seller.
Yeah.
He already has it already.
Yeah,
done,
exactly.
So he can shop it out, and if you want to mark it up, then you can. Okay.
Right, and so in that case, your pool of buyers is infinite. You're-
Absolutely, but what happens if no one closes, if no one wants
10-day
to-
inspection, just
Did they
cancel on the Binzer.
contract?
Just cancel on the Binzer every time.
But they have limited time to release.
Yeah. Well, they've built up a network of people they can email it to. But I mean, all you have to do is go on Facebook. Hey, I'm looking. Who are my investors out there? And I get like a bunch of people will be like, hey, me. Like I see it all the time. Like 10, 12 people will respond to anybody saying, hey, I have a property. You know, need some work. Do you want information? You know, on my Facebook, anyways, like 10 to 12 people always say yes. So I mean.
So did you become like not greedy? Because I feel like if I get a property, I want it. So after a while, did you just start shopping? Then when you first started, you probably took all the properties, right?
So my mindset is,
Fast.
my personal mindset has shifted, where why should I take that personal risk when I can make $9,000 and not have to do anything with the property, and not have it associated with me whatsoever. Whereas I had flips where I was putting 50, 60K cash
And hoping
funding the rehab and letting it sit there for 6 months and trying to get it out. So I mean, yeah, we made a lot of money, but at the end, like when you start doing this enough and start seeing these wholesalers, I'm not saying all wholesalers are bad or good or whatever, but like you start seeing them make $10,000
Doing nothing.
for all they did was slide the paperwork from A to B. I mean, why would you want to take that risk?
Right.
So that's why I work with investors. I still invest. Like I'm still involved and I still do flips, but the majority of my business is with investors, helping them do it because they don't have a real estate license, they don't want to get one, and they don't know enough about the industry to get involved and be successful. So they come to me and I help them do that. So I make my 3 points, and then they're the ones who are taking on the risk.
But when you first started,
When I first started, I took all the deals I could.
yeah, that's okay.
But I mean, but if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't.
Right.
If I knew what I knew now, then I wouldn't do that. I would sell them and make $10,000 and just go about my business.
Right.
You know, because to me, it's like if you're going to make $30,000, but it's going to take 6 months, and you're taking an enormous risk, or you're going to make $10,000, it's going to take 2 days, and there's no risk. I mean, that's a decision for everybody, but I know what my decision is now.
I know, I did a $1 million flip in Portland, Oregon in 2008, and it was an off-market deal, and I made money on it, but I went through so much hell. I was like, I'm gonna write my picture, I don't think I'm gonna make it through this, because it was so stressful.
Yeah.
And my realtor made $30,000 in commission, because it was such a big deal, and I'm like, I'm jealous of what he's doing. That's what made me get a real estate
Yeah.
license.
It's smart, and there's no, like I say this, there's no other industry that you can join for so little and have, there's no ceiling on what you can make, and as long as you know what you're talking about and put yourself in the right room,
And ethical.
it's huge. There's and the other thing too about it, so just the dark side of investing, there's no quicker way to get sued or to get an ethical complaint than working with investors too, because you know even though they sign every document that they understand market conditions, they understand that, you know, you're not gonna hold the broker liable, well, who provided them the ARV? You know, who told them what they were gonna make? It was you, right? So it's just, there's good and bad to it, but for me, that risk is less than putting my own cash at risk, because at the end of the day, they can't
And
sue me.
time.
Time is the big one. Time is the big one. Because, you know, as the GC, I'd be driving properties, I'd be doing all the work, so you think I put in 50 grand, but I also put in like
Time.
20 hours a week, so what's my time worth too? You know, it's just, so you calculate all back, if I make 10 grand on the whole deal, and I put 20 hours a week for 6 months, I made like $5 an hour maybe, $3 an hour, something really stupid. Like why? So
It
why
works
do
out
it?
that way for sure.
Yeah. So why do it? And that's why the gap funding and the 100% financing is so appealing to people, because they don't put any money into it. So that your return's a lot more impressive. So it's just a different way to do things, and that's why I'm telling you, the property, that's where the money. The property is the currency. If you have the property, you have the currency.
Okay.
You can find a buyer.
Mhm.
So
But, well, isn't it hard to lock up a property on the MLS without proof of funds? Like,
dude, you can go to any hard money lender and they'll send you a proof of funds.
some
Anyone.
are sketchy. They don't want to, like, well, I have a hard money investor. He's all, I'm not going to send you proof of funds. He's all, you have to lock it up first. He's all, I'm not going to just.
Well, I would find a different guy, because Steeple Rock Funding, that's who I've used for 5 years. Like I have a proof of funds letter up to $1 million. I can acquire anything up to $1 million. Like it's just there, and he updates it regularly, so I can send a fresh one. So, any hard money lender will give you a proof of funds, and they might call him. If they call him, they'll be yes, he's. But they always have the caveat on there that it's subject to them verifying the deal. You know, that you have a deal, but the proof of funds is not the hard part. If someone, agents are getting a little bit smarter, where they're going to ask more questions and what your intent is, and if they see the assignment clause, they're going to be like, why do you have an assignment clause on there? You know, or are you not the end user? And, you know, it just depends on how much interest they have versus if they're going to take your
Well,
contract.
no, you kind of don't. Do you scour the MLS?
I only buy off the MLS.
You only?
Like we talked about before, I think you walked in a little bit late.
I literally bought a flip, so I literally had to get a contractor. So yeah, I'm doing it.
But the MLS, you have all the leverage. If you try to buy from a wholesale, you have zero leverage.
Well, no, I'm talking about door knocking, because that's what I'm going to start taking out.
I mean, you could do that too. You can find buyers that way, but you know, I still think.
You can buy for your best deals that way.
My biggest home runs I got off market, and because I had a relationship with somebody who needed to offload the property.
That's more random than that, though.
Yeah. But those are the biggest deals, and you can't build a business off that. So I just go where the properties are, and that's the MLS. And if your business is to make $10,000 per flip, and you're trying to do anything at scale, any kind of volume, then if you do 10, that's a pretty good living. If you do 20, or if you sell some of them, if you do.
So, are you writing contracts sight unseen, and is that like unethical?
No. It's all sight unseen. I never see a property until I have it under contract. There's just not enough time in the day.
So you just find it on the MLS, write up the contract and send it in?
I tell them in the email, we haven't seen it. I'm honest.
I'm pretty sure they would know too.
No, they always check. Have you seen the property yet? I'm like, my ID hasn't popped up on your key box. But I always explain it. Like, I have an investor. We've closed X amount of deals. We're legit. We've closed this. I check my MLS listings. You can see all of our properties all of our inventories on the market. Our intent is to close. Like, I'm very specific and I explain what we're doing. Like, I'm not trying to hide anything. Like, this is what we're doing. We haven't seen it, and I just say we literally don't have the time to go drive every property. Otherwise, we'll miss every deal. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, we write for every one deal we get. I write 100 offers. It's like, who has time to go look at that many properties? It's not feasible. So as long as you're upfront and explain what you're doing and how you're doing it. I mean, only one time I've ever had anybody really push back on that. Like, you're not, like, they'll say, hey, I need you to see it before we present, and that's fine too. Just tell me that. Or if you put in the MLS that's the way to do it, then that's fine. Because at least I'll know the game, how you want to play the game I'll know.
So
But
there's no like procuring calls on their end, like since
No.
you didn't see it, like
mm, mm. But they didn't show it either, so there's no procuring costs. I mean, in order for there to be a procuring cause, they would literally have to show my investor the property.
well, because I'm thinking, you know, since they put the effort and put it on the MLS
Uh-huh.
and provide the pictures.
Doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. If they pop the key box and my my investor was there, then I might have an issue. Like that's why I always tell my investor, like, you don't go anywhere without me. Like otherwise, like I just tell them, like, that's fine, but I'm just not going to be a part of the deal. So if that other realtor's your realtor now.
So you said you had 100 offers to get one deal?
It works out to something like that. I mean, it's not that bad, but I mean,
Okay, it's what's the time?
timing. I mean, I'm just talking about time. When someone asks you why you haven't seen it yet, it's just timing wise. Like timing is just not feasible to do it that way because you're writing the volume versus how many you get is just it's too tough to go see everyone. Now, if they tell me in the response to the offer that they want me to go see it first, then it tells me that hey, they're thinking about our offer. So okay, we'll go see it. And then if they say we're not going to even look at your offer without showing it, then I'll call my investor and say, hey, do you want to go? Like, how much do you want this property? Do you want to go see it? Because they're not going to look at it. So then we'll decide. Or if they say on the MLS, we'll know right then. Like it'll have to be. If it says on the MLS no offers without viewing the property, we'll have to know right there whether or not we want to do the deal or not. Is that my hook?
Not just, yeah.
right at the 30 mark.